Anatomy 32, Chapter 12, the cardiovascular system, blood. Topics, erythrocytes and blood types. So, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, the pluripotent stem cells lead to the production of red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes. So we are going to learn them as erythrocytes. And what's interesting that along this pathway, as the erythrocytes are produced, they eject their nucleus. So erythrocytes are not true cells. They are formed elements because they do not have a nucleus and are actually missing a lot of the other organelles. So mature erythrocytes, again, are lacking major organelles. They are considered formed elements. Their sizes are very specific. Basically, they are sized so that they just barely fit into blood capillaries. You can see images out there of erythrocytes stacked in order, one by one, traveling through blood capillaries. It's pretty cool. Within the erythrocytes is the protein hemoglobin. So basically, they are big bags of hemoglobin, and this protein is red in color, which gives them the red color they possess. And hemoglobin is the protein that binds to oxygen. So when oxygen enters the bloodstream from the lungs, the oxygen will then bind to the hemoglobin in the red blood cells, in the erythrocytes. And for the function of hemoglobin, it is critical that it has iron. So iron, the nutrient iron, the mineral iron, is important because it is found in hemoglobin, and it is what helps bind the oxygen. So erythrocytes, again, they have a concave shape. I basically imagine after the nucleus gets expelled, it sort of leaves a little dimple in the erythrocytes. They possess hemoglobin, basically bags of hemoglobin that binds almost all of the oxygen in blood and also can bind some carbon dioxide. The erythrocytes depend on anaerobic respiration. They do not have mitochondria. They do not use oxygen to make ATP, to produce their energy. So they don't use the important nutrient they are carrying. And because of the very characteristics of erythrocytes, their lifespan is only approximately 120 days. So old erythrocytes will need to be removed from the bloodstream, and this occurs in the spleen and in the liver. So red blood cells, erythrocytes, are removed from the bloodstream by the spleen and the liver. And finally, it's worth noting that red blood cells are always red. Blood is always red. Some things out there say that some people think that blood can be other colors, but no, in humans, blood is always red. All right, the erythrocytes possess surface molecules called antigens. So there are structures on the surface of the erythrocytes that help to allow our body to distinguish these cells and recognize them as cells that belong in our body versus cells, structures that do not belong in our body. And this is basically how our immune response works. Now, different people have different structures on their erythrocytes. They can either have structures A, so antigen A, on their red blood cells, or they could have structures B, antigen B, on their blood cells, or they can have both A and B, so they possess both the A antigens and the B antigens on the surface of their red blood cells, or finally, they have neither antigen, so they lack the A antigen and the B antigen. And when we talk about people's blood types, it is based on the presence or absence of these antigens. So someone with A blood type have the A antigen on the surface of their erythrocytes. Someone with B blood type have the B antigens on the surface of their erythrocytes. Someone with AB blood possesses erythrocytes with both antigens, and someone with O blood type lacks the antigens. So their red blood cells are somewhat smooth in comparison. Now, there's also another important antigen for blood types called Rho. At least that's what we're going to refer to it as, and it is denoted by a plus or minus If it's a plus, then the Rho antigen is present, so that extra structure is present. And if it's negative, then it is absent. Technically, the antigen is referred to as antigen D, but I'm going to call it Rho because I want to try to be consistent. All right, so someone has type A blood. That means they have the A antigen on the surface of their red blood cells. It also means they have antibodies against the B antigen because that does not belong in their body. So they have antibodies that will target the B antigen if it is arrives in their bloodstream and try to deal with it because it is an enemy, enemy to the body. Then there's people with type B blood. They have the B antigen on the surface of their red blood cells, and they therefore have antibodies against the A antigen, so anti-A antibodies. Again, they only have the B antigen on their blood cells, so A antigen is not supposed to be present. So if it is, it must be an invading cell or pathogen or whatever, and so it has antibodies to target and help eliminate things with the A antigen. Someone with blood type AB, again, they have both the A antigen and the B antigen. Both are present on their red blood cells. Because of this, there are no antibodies against A or B. They're supposed to be in the body, so there's no reason to target them as invaders. And then finally, someone with O blood type lacks the antigens. They are not present. They are not supposed to be present in this person. And so therefore they have antibodies against A and B antigens. So anti-A antibodies to target the A antigen, anti-B antibodies to target the B antigen. Because if either of those antigens are present on some structure, then that means they are invading the body. And then, as I mentioned before, there's the Rh or Rho blood type, which is either positive or negative. If it's positive, that means you have the Rh antigen on the surface of your red blood cells. If you have the Rh antigen on the surface of your blood cells, then it is supposed to be there. It's supposed to be in your body, and so you lack any antibodies. No need to try to destroy things with the Rh antigen because it's supposed to be present. It belongs. If you're Rh negative, then you lack the Rh antigen. It's not on your erythrocytes. There's no reason it should ever be in your body. So that means you will possess the anti-Rh antibody that will target that antigen. Because if that antigen showed up in your bloodstream, that means it's from an invading cell or structure. Technically, in an Rh negative person, they only produce the antibodies against Rh after exposure to Rh positive blood. But since there's no way for a hospital, a nurse, whoever to know if someone's been exposed before, they just assume someone who's negative in their blood type is going to have a response. So they take that into account when determining which kind of blood can be used for a blood transfusion. So basically, we assume someone who's Rh negative possesses the antibody against the Rh antigen, in order to prevent any accidents in the hospital. All right, normally, if someone's giving a blood transfusion with the appropriate type of blood, then their blood will remain nice and healthy. Here's a slide of some blood. Let's be a faded slide because the cells look a little faded, but still nice and healthy. However, if you give someone the wrong kind of blood, one that their antibodies will attack, then that will cause the new blood, the incorrect blood, to agglutinate, to clot up together and form these big clots that can be very, very dangerous to the person. And basically what's happening is the antibodies against the invading antigen will bind to those antigens and also bind to other red blood cells that possess those antigens and form these big masses of cells. And these big masses of cells basically act as blood clots and can block blood vessels, leading to things like strokes, heart attacks, and deaths. So it is always very important during a blood transfusion for the person to receive the appropriate kind of blood, because nobody wants their patient to die. All right, so here is an example. During a blood transfusion, a person can receive blood from someone else. That someone's blood must have the same antigens as that person or less. So you can receive blood from someone who has the same blood type as you, or a blood type that has fewer antigens than you possess. So here's an example. My blood type, the professor's blood type, is A positive. Who could I receive blood from? Well, same antigens or less. So I could receive blood from someone who's A positive, have the exact same blood type as me. I can see someone who's A negative. They have the A antigen but lack the Rh. That is fine. I could receive blood from someone who's O positive. They lack the O antigen, but they have the Rh antigen. So that is fine. And I also could receive blood from someone who's O negative. They lack both of the antigens I possess. There are no other antigens present, so O negative is also acceptable. So again, I am your professor. My blood type is A positive, so I can receive blood from A positive, A negative, O positive, O negative. The same antigens as me or less. So which antigens are on my erythrocyte? Obviously, it's A antigen, because it's A blood type, and Rh antigen because it's positive, the A antigen and the Rh antigen. Which antibodies are in my blood plasma? Well, that is the anti-B antibodies. The B antigen does not belong in my body, does not belong in my bloodstream. If it is present, that means an invading structure or cell is now in my body, and my immune response is going to attack it. These anti-B antibodies will attack the B antigen. And if it's a blood transfusion, there's going to be a lot of those invading red blood cells, and there'll be massive agglutination, and I would die. So again, remember, your professor's blood type is A positive. If you ever end up giving blood transfusions to someone named Adam Majewski, remember, his blood type is A positive. All right, which blood type is the universal donor? Which blood type can be given to anyone? That is O negative. O negative. It lacks the antigens that are relevant for blood types. So it is smooth as a baby's bottom, and babies' bottoms are very smooth. So you can give O negative blood to anybody. Which type is the universal acceptor? Which blood type can accept blood from anybody? That is AB positive. AB positive has all three of the relevant antigens: the A antigen, the B antigen, and the Rh antigen. Therefore, it has no antibodies against these antigens. So AB positive can receive blood from anybody. Which blood type would be a good choice for a blood transfusion for someone with a B negative blood type? It would be A negative, the same or less. These all are all positive. They would be a bad choice. Anemia. Anemia is a disorder defined as a reduced oxygen carrying capacity. This could be because the person has fewer red blood cells, their hematocrit is low. Could be because they're not producing enough hemoglobin, so there's not enough hemoglobin in the red blood cells. It could even be because they don't have enough iron in their body, so the hemoglobin being produced doesn't work. So they have big, healthy red blood cells, lots of hemoglobin, but the hemoglobin doesn't work, doesn't bind to oxygen. Anemia can lead to lots of various symptoms depending on its cause, yellowing of eyes or yellowing of skin if it's from red blood cells breaking down, paleness, coldness, shortness of breath, weakness, dizziness, low blood pressure if it's loss of blood that's causing it, and so on, with, of course, in the most severe cases, leading to fainting, chest pains, and even a heart attack. So anemia is not, can be very severe, and so definitely should be something that should be treated as soon as possible. And sickle cell anemia is caused by a genetic disorder that leads to a deformed red blood cell that constantly ruptures and therefore can't carry oxygen. And that's it for this part of the lecture for Chapter 12.